Nobody in the video, kitten? No? Okay. Hi, I'm Mallory from AniMal Advice, and a question I get a lot is, what kind of dog should I get? What kind of dog would be best for my family? What kind of things should I look into when I'm thinking about getting a dog? 10 things to consider before you get a dog for me and my family, or for my household. So a lot of people come up to me, what kind of dog should I get? What kind of dog would work best for my family? What kind of dog do you recommend? And there's a lot of things that you have to ask yourself before you're ready to answer that question. So I've got about 10 things. There's a lot of things that can go into deciding what kind of dog you should get. So while watching this video won't necessarily answer your question, hopefully watching this video will give you some tips and help you decide what kind of dog is going to be best for your family. So one of the first things I would consider when thinking about what kind of dog to get would be how many people are in your house. More specifically, how many children are in your house. Because that right there is a big deciding factor for a lot of it. If you have a lot of young children running around your house, and this counts for visitors too, even if you have people coming over, if you're watching other people's kids, or if you have nieces and nephews that come over, you have a lot of young children coming into your house all the time, you have to consider them as part of it. If you have elderly people in your house, if you have elderly family that visits, or you take care of anybody that's an older person, one of the first things I would say you should think about before you get a dog is how many people are in your house. More specifically, what are their ages? So especially if you have little children, you have to really consider their needs. You need to make this environment the best possible one so that everybody's happy. A couple of things is, if you have a really young child, you've got to remember they don't know how to interact with an animal. So if you get a young animal that hasn't been trained, and they don't know how to interact with a kid either, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Generally, I would recommend, if you have kids under 5 or 6, really think about it before you get like a young puppy, because you're adding a lot of work and you're going to have to be on top of it all the time. You don't want little kids getting knocked over and getting injured by larger dogs, even on accident. And then of course, if a kid doesn't know when to stop, if a kid doesn't know how to understand what a dog is saying, which, they don't, you always run the risk of them possibly getting bit, and that's a horrible situation nobody wants to be in. So if you have younger children, it might not be a bad idea to consider getting a dog that's already a couple years old. Maybe one that's already a little bit house trained or potty trained, already knows some basic commands. My biggest thing too when you're getting a dog is to look at shelters and to look in rescue groups. They often have really young, healthy dogs that they've already tested with kids. They've already tested them with other animals, with cats, with dogs, and they can tell you what you're getting yourself into. So that's really nice to know when you have kids. Now, if you're up for the challenge and you have a young toddler, a couple years old, and you want to get a puppy and you want to potty train both of them at the same time, go for it. It's going to be some work. That's not to say that it can't work, but it's something to consider if you have young kids. Similarly, if there's older people in your home, they may not appreciate the most rambunctious puppy that's going to have sharp nails jumping on them. Again, getting a slightly older dog, they're a little bit less prone to being so crazy or to jumping around. They may already be a little bit trained. Number 2, you want to think about who's going to be the primary caretaker. You can have many people in your house that want a dog. Just because somebody wants the animal, especially children, they're not going to necessarily be the primary caretaker. Now, if it's just you and you live alone, it's obviously you. Who's going to be the primary caretaker? Because they're really the one that should be making a majority of this decision. If you have a larger household or you've got a lot of kids, you've got to remember they're probably not going to be the ones financially responsible for the pet. As much as a kid says, they'll clean up the yard, they'll do the feeding, blah, 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 they might not. So, again, before you go into this lifelong commitment with this living creature, you need to realistically figure out who's going to be taking care of the animal, and who's going to be taking care of the dog, and how much are they willing to do. Number 2, basically, the primary caretaker needs to be the one making the decisions on this. Number 3, how often are you home? How much time do you spend at home? Evaluate how much time you have to spend with an animal. A dog is, again, it's a big commitment, and they take a lot of work. If you are somebody that is going to be the primary caretaker, but you work 80 or 100 hours a week, it might not be the best time to get a dog right now. Or it may be better to consider some of the less conventional options, like getting a senior dog or getting an older dog that just is ready to lay around the house and is a little bit of a companion, things like that. So just consider how much time you're actually home. And that brings me to number 4. Why do you actually want a dog? What's the reason that you're thinking about getting a dog? It seems like a silly question, but really, do you want this dog as a companion for yourself? Do you want this dog as a companion for your children? Do you want this dog as a protector of your home? Maybe you have a lot of property and you want, a dog that's going to be like ready to run around your property and protect your land. Maybe you want a sporting dog or a tracking dog. Maybe you're an outdoorsy kind of person and you want a dog that's going to be going on camping trips with you and wants to hang out in the woods all the time. I'm a big fan of mixed breeds. I like mutts. Mutts are probably my favorite breed. But the Labradors, the Labrador Retrievers, German Shepherd mixes, Labrador mixes, they're all pretty laid back family dogs, usually. So those might be good things to consider if you're looking for just, that traditional family dog. A lot of times it looks like a Labrador. There's a reason for that. They're really good family dogs. They're pretty laid back. They'll go with the flow. You want to exercise them a ton? Great. You want to have a day off and be lazy? Great. They're pretty much they're pretty go with the flow kind of dogs. Beagles, aside from being a bit chatty at times, they're pretty good family dogs. They're gonna lay around on the couch with you if you want to go outside and run around. They're gonna want to do that too. So beagles can be another good family pet. A lot of the smaller dogs, again, it depends on how little your children are. But a lot of those little dogs are pretty happy with their one walk a day, and they'll sit on the couch with you and hang out and play with your kids. One of my favorite conversations that I had with someone one time was they like big dogs. They like how majestic and how intimidating these big dogs look. And they wanted to know, what kind of dog should I get? I want kind of like a bigger dog. What else are you looking for in the dog? And their answer is, well, I don't want him to be like too high maintenance, I take him for walks, but I'm not gonna be able to go running with him or anything, so I can't have a dog that's too high energy. I just want them to scare the bad guys. But then on the flip side, big dogs, some of the big dogs can be drooly. They don't want a dog that's going to be really drooly because that's so messy. And they didn't want a dog that was going to shed a lot. Like a little bit of shedding is okay, but they didn't want a dog that was going to shed a ton or be super messy. They, wanted a dog that's generally healthy, that doesn't have a lot of medical issues so that it wouldn't be getting sick all the time. It just got a little bit silly, so eventually I stopped him and I was like, look, here's the dog breed you need. You need a cardboard cutout of a Rottweiler and an alarm system. And they laughed. They thought that was funny. But they got my point. My point was, there is no perfect animal that's going to be no work. There's no one animal that is not going to have any work you have to put into it. It's a living creature. So if you're looking for a dog that is a protector, that's great. But you still have to be willing to clean up the yard and clean up their messes and deal with things when they get sick. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get this perfect dog no matter where you get it from. How much time and money are you willing or able to put into this animal? Because what you put in is what you're going to get out. If you want to put in minimal effort, you're probably going to get minimal good dog on return. The more time that you spend interacting with this animal, especially like intentionally training this dog, the better dog they're going to be. It's just like anything else. The more you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. There are some dogs, though, that don't require a ton of training. Some of the smaller ones might be like a Bichon, a Maltese, a Yorkie, those kind of toy breeds. They're still pretty laid back. You don't have to worry about them knocking over grandma or knocking down the neighborhood children. Probably not as big of a deal as if you have a Great Dane or you have a Mastiff, or you have a German Shepherd that wants to jump on people because they'll knock the person over. Speaking of Mastiffs, though, as far as the larger dogs, Mastiffs, actually Greyhounds, they're pretty lazy. They're kind of couch potatoes. You do have to watch and make sure they're not going to get overweight, but they're a little bit less active. So as far as time goes, if you don't have as much time to spend taking a dog out to parks, taking them out on walks, getting them real trained, those guys can be lazy couch potato companions. This is Libby. So that kind of leads into number 5. How much time are you willing or able to put into this animal? The more time you can spend intentionally training them, helping stimulate their mind, keeping them active. A tired dog is a good dog. The more time you spend with them burning their energy up is going to be less time that they might spend destroying your house. So then number 5, how much time are you willing or able to put into this pet, and just because you don't have a lot of free time doesn't mean that you should not be able to own a dog, but you just have to be smart about the kind of dog that you pick. You don't want to pick a border collie or a boxer. They're very high energy dogs. They are very, very smart dogs. So you need to be able to not only exercise them very regularly, but also challenge their brain. I tell people all the time, especially with boxers and border collies, get food puzzles. Enroll them in some type of agility or training classes, like more than just sit, stay, come, those beginning puppy classes. Do more advanced stuff, and if you're able to stimulate their brains and challenge their minds as well as tire them out, they're going to be really good dogs. If you don't have time to do that, though, they're going to destroy your house. A good dog, if you are not able to do those kinds of things, again, going back to Labradors, they're pretty much go with the flow. If you're going to be more lazy or just unable to do more stuff with them. Mastiffs, they're huge, but surprisingly enough, they're just lazy. Just because they're bigger doesn't necessarily mean they require more work. They're going to drool a lot, but they like to sit on the couch. Greyhounds are actually couch potatoes, They're going to enjoy a good run once in a while, but for the most part, they're pretty happy to just lay around and be pet. So those are kind of good options. And then a fair amount of the smaller dogs, Yorkies, Bichons, a lot of the Spaniels, they're going to be pretty happy with just minimal amounts of exercise and training. Something like a Jack Russell, though, even though they're small, which maybe means you can tire them out a little bit more quickly, they're still incredibly smart, and so you don't necessarily want to take a back seat when it comes to training them. And then, kind of similar to that one, but number 6 would be the age of the pet. Something to consider. You don't have to get a young dog. You don't have to get a really old one either, but you don't have to get, a puppy every time. Just because you get an animal when it's a couple years old, just because you get a dog when it's 2 or 3, doesn't mean they're not going to be the most amazing pet. And again, they've already had that training put into them. So it's not going to be as much work. Just, you're going to know what you're getting into. When you get a dog that's a couple years old, again, I always recommend going to an animal shelter. Go to a rescue group. They do all kinds of conditioning training, so they're going to be testing these dogs, even though they're a couple years old, and you're tempted to think, oh, but then I'm not going to be able to teach the dog exactly how I want to teach it. Well, maybe you want to do that, and then get a young dog. There still are young dogs at shelters and rescue groups all the time. All the time there's young dogs. But go for it. If you have a lot of time and you have a lot of the energy and you're willing to do that, go for it. But if realistically, if you don't have the time or you kind of want it so that somebody else has done it, they can tell you, is this dog good with cats? Is this dog good with kids? Is this dog good with men? Is this dog good with women? They can tell you those things already. So that can be super helpful, especially when you have those kind of stipulations. I want a dog, but when you go get a dog that's a couple years old already, you're already going to know all of the buts. They're even going to, hopefully be honest with you and tell you what some of the downsides are. What are some of the issues that the dog has that you might need to work on. And then you're still ahead of the game because you already know what problems the dog might have, so you're going to be ready for it. If you know that they like to chew stuff, then you're going to be ready to pick up your valuables, buy them lots of chew toys, work with them on that kind of stuff. Number 7, does the dog shed or do they not shed? And if you have a preference there, and you might not, there are, some dogs that might shed a little more than others. German Shepherds and Huskies, they've got those undercoats, those thick coats, and a couple times a year, your house is just going to be covered in hair, no matter what you do. But most of the short hair type of dogs that shed, moderate amount of vacuuming is going to be enough. If you don't want to have to deal with that at all, or possibly if you have somebody that's got some allergies, or you just don't like dog hair on your stuff, if you don't like dog hair on your stuff, you should really reconsider whether you want a dog or not. But anyway, if you don't want the dog hair issue, you can get a dog that doesn't shed. You still have to maintain their coat like you do your own hair. You're going to have to brush it regularly. And that's going to mean different things for different dogs, but regularly you're going to need to brush their hair, and taking them to a groomer periodically for them to get their hair cut. They will, just like us, actually need to get their hair cut. So that's something that will cost money and time, but it saves you the hassle of having a lot of dog hair all over the house, maybe so that your company comes over and doesn't complain that they sit on your couch and they walk away with dog hair. Again, if people coming over don't like dog hair on their clothes, you really want to reconsider whether you need those people in your life. But anyway, that's another aspect of dog ownership. Do you want to deal with the hair at home? Do you want to take them somewhere else and have somebody else deal with the hair most of the time? In general, poodle mixes, that's right, poodle mixes, are generally gonna shed less. So that is your golden doodle phenomenon sweeping the nation. Your everything doodle. You can mix a lot of dogs with poodles, and technically that makes them mutts now. Again, I like mutts. I think mixed dogs, I think they're more well-rounded animals, and they make, on average, better pets. But not always. Not always. But poodle mixes are going to be smart. They take very well to training. They're going to be a good example of a dog that you would need to take in and get it groomed. Talking about going to a groomer, you also have to think about taking them to a veterinarian. So most groomers are going to require that pets be up to date on vaccines before they come in and be groomed. Number 8, what is your budget? So every dog is going to need some level of care, and there's always going to be unplanned for expenses, But generally speaking, a smaller dog is going to eat less. So even if, hopefully you're buying a good quality food, it's going to last longer when you have a smaller dog. Shots and exams, those are all the same price across the board. But if your pet ever gets sick, which, that can happen, and you got to be prepared for that, smaller dogs generally are going to cost a little bit less than your larger dogs. Certain tests that you might need to run, or blood work and things that you might need to send out, that's still going to be the same, but just their general care, how much they eat, again, is going to be less. How much their medications cost, heartworm prevention, flea prevention, that's going to be less when you have a dog, that's 20 pounds versus a dog that's 200 pounds. You're talking hundreds of dollars a year difference between just preventative medications. When you have a really, really large breed dog, you have to understand that things are going to cost a lot of money. And if your dog ever got sick and needed a medication every day, usually those are based on weight. And so, again, the larger the dog, the more of a medication you might need. And so if it's an expensive medication, you could be looking at a lot of money for a big dog versus a little dog. It could be more affordable. But just generally speaking, a smaller dog will be a little bit less costly than a larger dog. I mean, even little things like buying a bed for the dog, buying Halloween costumes for your dog. The smaller sizes are going to be less money than the bigger sizes. So if cost is a huge factor, it's always a factor, let's be honest. It's always a factor when you're doing anything. But if it's a really big factor, you might want to budget for a smaller dog. And it doesn't mean it has to be, a Yorkie or a Chihuahua. There are even some of the Border Collies, some of the Labradors and Shepherds and those kinds of big dogs, sometimes those can be 30, 40 pounds. They don't have to be over 100 pounds. So there's, even between breeds, there's size variance. So I would encourage you, go to the shelter, look online, look on Pet Finder. There's always so many dogs, and you can be pretty picky with what you want and still find some options. So obviously you want to budget for these things, but remember that a smaller dog probably going to cost you a little bit less than a bigger dog. Number 9, kind of a wild card. If there's a certain breed or a certain mix of a dog that you have just always loved and you just always dreamed of having, that is something to take into consideration. If you wanted a Newfoundland St. Bernard mix or a Mastiff mix dog, full breed, whatever, you might be willing to more easily overlook the constant stream of drool that's going to be coming out of their face onto your floor and your carpet and your walls. Can you tell I'm not a fan of drooling dogs? They're great dogs. It would just drive me nuts. They're really good dogs. They're pretty, those couple I mentioned are really laid back. They'd be good family dogs, but I couldn't handle all the drool, all the time, personally. But if that's something that, maybe it doesn't bother you. I know lots and lots of people, they carry towels around. They come into the clinic, they go to a park, they're just constantly carrying a drool rag, and it's just something that they've come to expect. So every breed is going to have their downfalls, but if there's one that you're in love with, you'd be more willing to overlook that. I love Huskies. They can be jerks. You go searching on YouTube for animals throwing temper tantrums, you're probably going to find a Husky. And that would bother some people too much, but I just love the look. I love their personalities, and I'm willing to overlook their stubbornness, and their hair. I mentioned earlier, they're one of the ones that have a ton of fur, a ton of hair, and that thick undercoat that you need to take them into the groomer and get it blown out, or brush them 24/7. And I'm much more willing to deal with that because I love the breed. I don't know why, I just always have. So definitely, if you've got a dog that you've just always wanted, you'll be willing to find a way to make it work. And I guess that brings me to number 10. The last one is a very practical one. And I guess that brings me to number 10, which is a very practical question. What kind of layout is your house and your land? Where do you live? If you live in an apartment, you might not want to get a boxer. Again, they're just gonna go stir crazy. And actually, Huskies love to be outside. If you have a ton of land, or if you don't have a ton of land, really, they're lazy dogs. What kind of layout is your house and your land that you have? If you're living in an apartment, you might want to get a smaller dog just because you don't have as much room for them, and you don't have a yard that you can easily access. So it might not be fair to get a dog that needs to run around constantly. Although even a small dog, like Jack Russell Terriers, they're small, but they're really high energy. So getting one of them and putting them in a small studio apartment, you might be asking for trouble. But do you have a lot of land? Do you have a lot of fenced in land, Do you have a ton of stairs in your house? It's not an end-all be-all, but German Shepherds and Labradors and some of the other bigger guys, they're going to get arthritis towards the end of their life, and a lot of times you get excited about getting a new pet, and you don't think about what they might need down the line. And so it's been a challenge for a lot of people that I know that have had, especially German Shepherds and Labradors. They get bad hips. They're just more prone to that, and so as they get arthritis and they have a hard time walking, all of a sudden it's this huge strain on the owner or on the primary caretaker to get them down all of these stairs to get them outside to go to the bathroom. Whereas if you have a smaller dog, you can pick them up, walk them outside. It's not a problem. So if you're going to be in a house that's got narrow hallways, you might not want to get the Great Dane. That's going to knock everything off all of your shelves. And if you have something where you have an apartment where you got to go down all of these stairs, you might want a dog that's going to be willing to be trained on a pee pad, like the Pomeranians and the Chihuahuas and the Yorkies. They're smaller. They don't seem to care as much about going outside all the time. So always a good option. Thinking about the layout of your house, how easy is it going to be for you to take care of this pet down the line? If you have a super tiny yard, you're not going to be able to throw that ball and get the dog's energy out. Do you have a park nearby that you can take them to? Do you have a park nearby that you're willing to take them to? So just make sure that if you're going to get a dog with high energy, that you've got a place to exercise them. Otherwise, again, go with one of the more lazy breeds. So that's 10 things I would recommend going through and thinking about before you add another member to your household. If there's something I missed, feel free to leave it in the comments. If you've got a specific dog breed that you think fits one of these categories just wonderfully, leave it in the comments. I would love to read about it. I'm sure other people would love to read about your experience to help them decide what kind of dog would be right for them. I'm Mallory from AniMal, and I will talk to you later.